Attendance, we've already talked about attendance. Agenda approval, does anybody have any additions, corrections to the agenda?
I had an addition at the end of the agenda, letter G, to recommend to keep Shelley Scaff on as a teacher negotiator until January 8th, 2024.
All right, so we have an agenda, and with that one thing, do I have an approval for the motion to approve the agenda?
Could I also make an suggestion? Could we talk about the science fair and possibly entertain the merits of opening that up to the public?
Today?
For future science fairs, if we could maybe discuss maybe a policy to open it up to the public in the future, maybe the merits of how that might benefit our school district and showcase our students.
Would you like to make a motion to add it to tonight's approved
Sure,
agenda?
absolutely. I'll make a motion to discuss the possibility of having a policy that would open up the science fair for the public to come and give support to our students and showcase their hard work.
So we have a motion. Does anybody have any questions for Toby right now?
I have a question.
Yes.
Like inviting the public to come in and see their projects?
Yes,
that what
just for
Don't
parents,
we do
grandparents,
that? We don't, okay.
anyone who's interested to come in and take a look and see what our kids are doing at Hinckley-Finlayson High School in terms of what their science projects, how they're doing, because they put a ton of work into it. And I'm sure that some kids would love to see the support. And moms and dads would like to come in and I'm sure take some pictures of their sons and daughters standing in front of their science project too.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second? I will second Toby's motion. There's a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We will add it to the bottom of tonight's. Before closed session.
Thank you.
Before closed session?
After closed session?
You tell me.
Before? All right, so now I need a motion to approve tonight's agenda with those two changes.
I'll make a motion.
A second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up is board member recognition.
I'd like to take a moment to recognize Shelley Scaff, who's been a school board member since January 2020, all the way through now, December. This is your last official school board meeting. Want to present you this in recognition of your dedication and your service to the children of the Hinckley-Finlayson Public Schools. Want to thank you for your work on teacher negotiations, MSBA, evaluation committees, comparable worth, which we're still working on, communication, retention, climate. Thank you for your work with the Hinckley-Finlayson School District, and my opinion is our district has made great gains since you've been on the school board. So thank you very much for all you do.
Without such a support of our great staff and fellow board members. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. Next up is open forum. Rules for open forum. There will be 3 minutes per speaker. Open forum shall not take more than a total of 15 minutes. There's no complaints about individual staff members. All presenters will conduct their business in a manner that meets community standards for decorum. The board will not take action on items presented in an open forum. Does anybody wish to speak?
I'm going to start. So, first off, thanks, Shelley. You've always been very supportive and an open ear, so I appreciate that. With that said, I don't take any pleasure in speaking tonight, but there's a handful of teachers here who are advisors and coaches wishing to speak during open forum. In the state of Minnesota, we as a teaching staff get a chance to sit at the bargaining table only once every 2 years, which puts a lot of pressure on us all to get things right. we have many pleasant conversations while bargaining, and we've had many of those so far. So I don't want to overlook that part of it, but there is one section of our bargaining that has been a struggle. We've had a really hard time getting really any conversation out of the district regarding coaches and advisors for a number of programs: theater, senior class advisor, one act play, yearbook, student council, weight room, Minnesota Honor Society, art show, robotics, cheerleading. Many teachers in these programs are putting in many hours. Some of these positions are not paid anything at all, while many others are paid only half of what their peers from regional districts are being compensated. Compared to norms, also, some of these programs are lacking additional staffing, such as an assistant. We have people here who have been volunteering, in some cases, hundreds of hours per year for 9 years, others 5 or 6 years, others 3 years, others a couple of years. Despite the many years of work, some people here have never asked for compensation until this round of bargaining, while some others have been attempting these failed conversations for 2 years already. The disappointment of having never advocated for oneself, only to be ignored when one finally has, is not a type of disappointment that is easy to describe. While I could talk your ear off on this topic, I want to leave the floor open for my colleagues. In closing, the Minnesota Department of Education has statistics available online, and you can check out the expenditures compared to revenue through 328 districts in the state of Minnesota. And our district spends well below average the revenue that we take in. If we just spent on average, compared to 328 districts, we would be spending nearly $700,000 per year more. So, you know, when you're saving money, that's really good for your own finances at home. But I think a public entity that is trying to invest money into programming and funding that will benefit students, I just wonder, you know, are we investing in students or are we investing in our bank account? So these programs nourish a wide variety of students, and these people here have been caring for these programs over the years. It is time that we take care of them now and into the future.
I'd like to speak next. My name is Alyssa Vikstrom, and I'm the Minnesota Honor Society advisor as well as senior class advisor. And I could talk your ear off all day long about these programs that I love, but I've been told I can't do that. So I just want to show you a picture, and I'm going to relate it to how this relates to negotiations. It's a visual of what equality and equity look like. And I won't explain all the details in it because you've probably seen it before, but I will explain how it relates here. C-schedule positions are usually given all the same raises, like 2% across the board. And that's served us pretty well over the years, but that's an example of equality, and I'm really asking for equity. We're all here asking for equity. The board should be really proud that a lot of the positions on the C schedule are compensated with a wage that is in line with other districts in our area. But the coaches and advisors here tonight are represented in this image by the people who cannot see over the fence. In order to be paid fairly, we will need an additional raise that our coworkers on the C schedule do not. That's not inequality, nor is this a lack of teamwork or caring about other positions. This is our plea for equity. As educators, we are shown this graphic at more professional development sessions than you can imagine. We've all been lectured about equality versus equity, and I'm really proud to say that our building does an excellent job of giving students the assistance they need to succeed, whether that's tutoring during our prep, before and after school, study hall, following IEP accommodations, 504 plans. We champion equity in this district. So I'm here to ask that you treat your staff the same way, show equity, and give these C-schedule positions the raises they deserve, and the raises we would get if we chose to teach in a neighboring district. We are skilled, qualified, and passionate individuals who just want to be treated equitably.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm here to discuss the theater positions. And I want to start off by saying that theater is a really important program. It's important as an extracurricular. It helps students foster empathy. It teaches students how to interact effectively. It teaches them how to speak in front of a crowd, and it helps them with their confidence. They learn how to speak clearly, lucidly, and thoughtfully. And it teaches students how to think quickly and react appropriately for the situations that they're in. Wes Sorum sent all of you an email that highlights the time commitment in regards to lighting for a full-length show. I hope that those of you who made it to our fall production this year
we're able to see the marked difference in lighting from last year's fall production to this year's. That time was very well spent and very beneficial. I also want to talk about set building. This year's set was much more involved than last year's. It included a balcony that students needed to stand on. It requires knowledge and skill to make something like that that's safe for our students to stand on and to be interacting with. Set design is its own art. It requires tricking the human eye into seeing things, textures that aren't there. It requires knowledge of indoor lighting, shadow, utilizing unique skills to create illusions. And sound. Sound is someplace where, again, as a director, I need additional support. We have the new sound system, and with that comes needing a sound person to run the mics. It takes time to find sound effects, practice the timing, when to turn on and off the mic packs, create playlists, cut sound clips, and this requires knowledge of sound and music. In addition to Wes's approximately 15 hours that he volunteered this year, Eric did the set building and sound and volunteered nearly 80 hours for the fall production. And that's what made the show the best it could be. We have individuals in the district who have these skills, but right now they're volunteering dozens of hours to support our students. And instead of just using our staff members for their skills, staff should be shown that the district values the unique skills that they possess through some kind of a stipend. On top of this huge need for paid additional help, directing a play is a huge undertaking. Head coaches of many sports are adequately compensated for the immense amount of in-season and off-season planning and decision-making involved. And I feel like the same principles should be applied to the theater director position. Picking a script, planning a set, picking costumes, finding props, shopping for these items, making a rehearsal schedule, 4 nights a week of rehearsals plus Saturday and Sunday set building for 6 to 8 weeks, stressing over every item in a large budget and making sacrifices. There are some roles in education where you spend as much time planning, scrutinizing, and constructing behind the scenes as you have to teach, and I'm voicing that this is a reality for theater. I know what other theater directors are being paid, and all I'm asking is to be paid on average. As far as average goes, it's also the norm to have at least one other paid staff helper in theater, which I currently do not have. I'm one person. You don't expect a head coach to coach a team alone. They have an assistant coach. The district has a policy concerning student to coach ratios, and once a team hits a certain number of athletes, they get additional coaches as support. Often that's a 1 to 10 staff to student ratio. Currently, with my situation, I need to pick scripts that have a small number of acting roles to help myself manage the number of students that are involved successfully. Theater is not just another extracurricular. Our students in the program are also leaders in the school and within their grade levels. These students are helping form the culture of our school, and I'm proud of the friendships and relationships that are formed in the process of putting on a show. To promote a program, you have to invest in it for whatever students are present, even when those numbers may be small. Without investment, there can be little to no growth. The theater program right now is growing. And if we want the arts to have a presence in our schools again, we need to commit financially to helping make that happen. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sam Faber, and I'm a teacher at Hinckley-Finlayson High School. And I came here today to speak on behalf of myself and other coaches in regard to the value of paying us for the time we put into the weight room and our student athletes. I thank you for the time to hear me and my colleagues advocate for ourselves and our students. This is my third year teaching and coaching in the district, and over the past 3 years, I've seen the weight room transform into a cleaner and more positive space for students. And I've also seen winter weights grow into popularity among students. To give a quick history of after-school winter weights, it started 3 years ago, my first year. In that first year, there were about 8 to 10 students coming consistently. During year 2, that number rose to around 20 student athletes coming consistently. This year I had to set a capped number of students that could join, as the space just isn't big enough to hold more than 24 lifters. In fact, during the sign-up days for the group this year, there were about 50 students who wanted to sign up. This year has been awesome to witness, as we have a group of students ranging from grades 8 through 11, both male and female students, athletes and non-athletes, and advanced and beginner weightlifters all working together in the same space. The last 2 months I've been advocating for myself and the other weight room coaches to be paid justly for the time and effort we put into the weight room and our students. Although my time and effort are of value, I'm going to speak on the value that our students get from after-school winter weights. One of the things that I love about weightlifting is that it teaches teamwork, organization, and perseverance. Often when students are struggling with their lifts or failing at their lifts, I remind them that the only way to get stronger is to fail. Isn't that similar to how sometimes the only way to learn in life is to fail? No doubt the sentiment shared with students is one that can serve them well in their academics as well as general life post Hinckley-Finlayson. Students that are in after-school winter weights are responsible for adding up their own weights, working with others, picking up after themselves, following safety guidelines, and giving each other feedback on form. These 5 skills, along with countless others, have a value for the students as they help the athletes become better people in school and more employable job candidates post-graduation. To add one more rationale as to why after-school winter weights is of value to our students, many studies have found that consistent exercise is linked with improved outcomes academically, socially, and emotionally, which benefits all of our students and in the long run, the district. During my high school experience, I was lucky enough to be part of a culture that celebrated and encouraged students to get into the weight room, and this culture was built by teachers and coaches who put in the time and effort to develop and deliver a well-rounded program. These teachers and coaches were enthusiastic about what they did and the benefit it gave to the students. But naturally, when teachers and coaches are putting in their time and effort out of the goodness of their heart, eventually there will be burnout. And that burnout will hurt or even kill the positive culture being created. On top of this, when the student athletes know that their coach is not being valued for what they are doing, that also has the opportunity to hurt or kill the culture that is being built. I hope that after hearing my colleagues and I speak about what we are doing and the benefit it provides our students and districts, you reconsider paying coaches and advisors for the benefit we are providing students. And I thank you for your time.
There's 2 minutes left of open forum.
Hi, my name is Joe Ranger. I represent our robotics program. I represent about 15 to 30 kids. What I will say is that I'm here to fight for my program for the amount of blood and sweat. I'm not going to say tears because we try not to cry until after the season. I put in 15 to 20 hours a week, including 4 or 5 hour days on Saturdays. I'm paid like a junior high coach, which collectively has shorter seasons, lesser responsibilities, and lesser expectations. No other sport or activity is invited to or paraded around like the robotics program. Most of my kids that I have in the robotics program aren't traditionally students that would participate in activities. They are one sport or activity person, robotics kids. So it'd be wonderful if we supported other coaches and activities. If every student and staff are known, valued, and challenged to succeed, and let's make every activity leader also known, valued, and challenged to succeed.
I'm Katie Hartle, and I am the student council advisor, and I'm very proud of how much our program has grown. We've come from no names being named, but more than just picking out the dress-up days for homecoming and snow week. We're actually having elections. We are running a lot of our meetings every month. We have a budget. We have officers who have responsibilities. We are learning Robert's Rules of Order with some help from Mr. Hickle, and it's grown into so much more. Again, leaders, all the things you've heard. Also, I'm also the class trip advisor, and even though I don't get paid this year, tomorrow night I'll be at the concession stand helping students fundraise because they need more than just like 4 months to fundraise for that. So I'd be happy to talk more if anybody ever wants to come to my office. It's lovely. I have a couch. Come sit down and I will talk to you about all of our amazing students and all the amazing things and the amazing people that are doing it. And these numbers are huge in these activities because of the staff that's doing it. We don't have 50 people who want to weightlift because they like the smell of the weight room. It's because of the staff.
I was kind of hoping you'd cut me out.
Can we also make sure some of this gets in the note?
All right, I want to thank everybody who presented tonight. Negotiations do resume next week, so thank you. We're gonna move on to the consent agenda. Does anyone have anything they want to pull or place later in our agenda for further discussion? Brian?
No ads.
All right, then I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second. There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up is the bills. If you have any questions on the bills, please state the page number and the bill number. Does anybody have any questions on the bills? If there are no questions, I'm looking for a motion to pay the bills.
I'll move that.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion regarding the bills? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up is reports. We have Bruce up with American Indian Education Report.
I have the American Indian Education Report. We've got it submitted on the end of November, right on time. It was a little up this year from last year, about 47,000 more. So we ended up with 147,500 or 147,500. And that money gets allocated to the Smart Mentor, Indian Education Smart Mentor salary. The Indian Education Coordinator, all of the programs, cultural programs that we do, cultural teachings, all the materials that we use in our program, pays for our professional development through our MIEA conference. Our NASA organization is funded through that and advisors. And we also give our officers, our NASA officers leadership training with that money. A few successes that we've had from our Smart Mentor program is that we are continuing to build positive relationships with our students, which improves academic success, and also I also act as a liaison between our students and teachers, and as well as the students and parents. Our NASA organization is up this year to 72% of our Native American students are involved in it at the high school level, and 100% at the elementary school level with 5th and 6th graders. That gives our students a sense of belonging. A lot of these students don't belong in any other organization or sport, so this gives them the power that they need to come to school, do well in school. We also have a lettering policy that we developed last year for our students in NASA, and to date, this year so far, we have 13 students that earned their high school letter through NASA. That's all I have. Any questions?
Does anybody have any questions for Bruce? All right, thank you, Bruce. Next up, we're going to move on to the curriculum director report. Jonathan.
All right, thank you. So tonight I'm focusing more on achievement and integration and world's best workforce. And achievement and integration used to be kind of with Bruce's report, but when Sandy was doing it, but I'm taking over that report now. So we have also a little bit more in funds this year, up to 120,000, and then an additional 10,000 and some change that goes towards the New Direction program. But with the achievement integration, we're funding a Smart Mentor this year at the high school and at the elementary, along with Rachel's Challenge for the high school. A little bit of money towards Wolf Ridge to help students in need. And then we continue to help fund New Direction and a portion of the school social workers' salary. The Smart Mentoring has gone really well at the high school, and we're trying to build that program at the elementary as well. So just seeing how that works, and it seems to work with our students and staff and help them in different ways. Then the New Direction is a big portion of these funds. For World's Best Workforce, that was out last month kind of for a first read. That program, we don't get money for that, but it's a required through the state for us to have that World's Best Workforce. And it covers anywhere from early childhood to students that are graduating in 12th grade. So there are different goals. There's about 6 different goals that cover all those different spans, and then covers different populations within our district. I'm looking for the okay to go ahead and take the world's best workforce and submit that again this year to the state. So looking at it as an action item.
Does anybody have any questions for Jonathan regarding either one or for sure the world's best workforce? If not, I'm looking for a motion to approve our plan.
I'll move that.
I'll second. If there's a motion and a second, is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Next up is the superintendent's report.
Reminder for all board members, our holiday breakfast is January 2nd, day after our holiday break. We'll begin serving at 7. Admin and board, we typically start setting up and getting things ready around 6 o'clock to 6:30. You're all invited. You can see the menu, but just a reminder that that is upcoming and a great way to recognize the hard work of our staff and to thank them for everything they do for our kids in our district. Bunch of upcoming meetings. Pay attention to the board update or board trainings and committees that are coming up. We still have quite a bit of things coming up here, even though there's only 2 weeks left of school. The MSBA conference is January 11th and 12th. If you're interested in going, let me know so I can get you signed up. So far I know of one board member who has confirmed 100% yes. They have not come out with the Friday schedule yet. So we're still waiting on that, but if you want to go, let me know so Jill and I can get you signed up. Number 4, I just published the seniority list that gets published in each school annually by October 1st. So just kind of for your information, what the seniority list was for this school year. And then we'll talk a bunch about funding later in the agenda, but I wondered if there was any questions on goals from myself and mid-year progress up to this point in the school year, or any feedback on anything goal related for the superintendent. Otherwise, that's what I have.
Does anybody have any questions for Ryan? All right, thank you, Brian. Next up is Kim, high school principal report.
Good evening. First on my agenda is I had a request to bring up a question from Subject Matters around the grade requirement for our angling class. Currently, for our angling, the requirement in Subject Matters is that students must be in the top half of our class academically or approved by the instructor or by me. And some things that Dan, the instructor, has shared about why he put that in. This was something that's been in there for several years. It was in there before I became principal. But he just talked about how there's several different field trips throughout the semester which kids have to leave classes for, and so just worrying about whether or not they can afford to miss out on their other classes if they're struggling academically. Also concerns around the trust that's needed due to using fishing equipment like hooks and knives, being out in the community, working with guest speakers. He wants to make sure that students are taking it because they think it's an easy class, and he wants to make sure that if they're struggling in other classes, they understand the workload and expectations of this class. So I just wanted to bring it to the board if there was any more discussion, if there's any thoughts or concerns or anything you want me to talk to him about or do differently going forward with that requirement. This is the only non-college level class that has that grad requirement or grade requirement.
But a person can be approved by either Dan or yourself, kind of exception to the rule,
Correct.
right? Okay.
Correct.
I have a concern with it because I don't think we want to start putting requirements on our non-AP and non-college class. Where does it stop? Where's it gonna stop? I don't agree with it. I missed it last year when it was first brought to us because I believe angling was the first year last year. But I think there's a lot of kids out there that maybe aren't academically gifted that would absolutely love to be in the angling class. And I do think that they should be able to I don't think they shouldn't not be, and I don't think it's up to the teacher to pick and choose who can be in the class. I don't think this district wants to start that.
Okay.
I don't know what anybody else has to say, but.
When they look at choosing which students can or cannot take it, do they also consider their behavior, past behaviors too, if there's been an issue?
Yeah,
So it's not just their grades, it's also their.
yeah, I think that's more of the concern from Dan, is just around behavior and the safety and being out on a fishing boat, a lot of unstructured, a lot of things like that. So, I mean, we can definitely look at changing it and doing something different. I'm completely open to that. That's what the board would like.
I'm not arguing behavior, I'm arguing academically gifted.
So look at maybe changing the wording. Would you like me to bring back a different, take that out and have a different type of requirement going forward for next month?
I think so. I think behavior is something that we could look at more than academically.
Okay, so changing that. All right, I will change that and bring a new proposal next month. Does that sound good?
Is there a waiting list or a long list of kids that want to get into it that don't?
No, our numbers are much lower this year.
So there aren't kids turned away?
I don't know exactly. Katie does all the registration, so I don't have the exact number. I can definitely let you know that though.
Well, they haven't registered
Well,
for it
they
yet this
know,
year.
but you have to be in the top half of your class. It says that in the handbook.
Yeah.
Oh, so they don't know that they, okay.
This is a new class, so they haven't registered for it yet, so.
Well, this current year,
Right, but the one you're talking about is
yeah.
So only kids that have taken number one could take two, I think. That's how it's read, isn't it?
But it's 1 and 2 have the same requirements, yeah.
Is that a motivation to do better on their other classes if they love to angle and really desire to go fishing? Is that a good motivation for them to behave better, improve in their other classes?
It could.
You think that's some value?
If I heard you guys correctly, I heard behavior, we'll still consider that, but it's the academic part, and some kids don't, they have to work really super hard with a lot of supports to get into the top half of their class, and some of them just don't have all that they need to get there, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. So we'll look at taking that out and doing something different around making sure we address the safety concerns. Thank you. Number 2 on my agenda tonight is just an attendance update. Really excited to see that we are at 91.5% attendance for the first part of the year, so up for the first time, the highest we've been in 4 years. A lot of work Mandy and Mallory and Bridget have done, calling families, working with families, trying to make sure kids get to school, so that is a really great thing. That's one of our high school goals this year, is to increase attendance in class, so that's really great. Number 3 is around academic data. Again, one of our high school goals is decreasing semester fails. And again, this is just quarter, so we'll look at semester fails. I'll bring you that data in February, but from 11% down to 9% Fs just in quarter 1. So again, that's a positive that we're going to continue to work on addressing that at the high school. So there's, again, some data for you to look at around academic data. Number 4 is referral data. That's one area that continues to be a struggle. We had a great first 6 weeks of school, and then around MEA, things kind of changed and saw a lot of behavior. So you can see our referral data is up from last year. Our attendance referrals are down, but our behavior referrals are up. And if you look at the 339, 210 are in 7th and 8th grade, which is 63% of the referrals. And a lot of those referrals are around, are minor referrals around disruptive type behavior. So what we're doing to address that is our 7th and 8th grade team meets during PLCs and looks at what's happening in the classroom. And so last week when we met in PLCs, they addressed some different antecedents or some things that they are noticing are kind of causing the behavior. So they identified 3 big areas. And so this week during PLCs, we're working with Nick from SCRED and looking at how we can prevent some of those antecedents, what kind of things we can do in the classrooms to support teachers, and support our students, and just looking at some different things we can do. So that's kind of where we're at right now with addressing some of those minor behavior concerns with our 7th and 8th graders. Number 5, again, kind of looking at that, so that disruptive handbook change that I'm asking for an action item tonight is around that minor disruptive behaviors in the classroom. So examples are, running, refusing to work, spreading rumors, the horseplay, the minor types of things. Like an example would be a kid would go around shutting a computer lid, some of those minor behaviors. And so the 4th referral right now says 1 day of new direction, and I'm asking to make a small change and add another option so that we can address some of the minor behaviors differently instead of just giving kids new direction for 1 full day, removing them from that class that they're struggling in and doing some proactive stuff using our behavior interventionalists to work with that student during that hour for several days versus just putting them down in new direction. So looking to make a change to that handbook for that reason.
So that's the 4th time they've been disruptive?
Yeah, correct. And it's not that I'm not going to use new direction, it's just giving another option to try something different.
Okay, because it says 4.
Yeah, so it could be new direction, or it could be just removing them from that class period to do some preventative teaching, those types of things, and working with the student on what's happening and why and how we can correct the behavior.
Does anybody have any questions regarding changing the handbook?
I would think it's worth a try because the 7th and 8th grade numbers are atrocious. So we gotta try something different, I think.
Of the 63%, Kim, what is the percent at like the grade level? Like Bonnie tells us, it's about a small percentage of kids making the same behavior consequence. Is that the same? Is that true in 7th and 8th grade, or?
It's about the same percentage from like grade to grade. So like if you look at the percentage of students with referrals, so of the 29 kids that have 6 or more referrals, 17 of them are in 7th and 8th grade.
Okay.
And then again, it's about the same for the 2 to 5. We are seeing an uptick in the 7th and 8th grade behaviors and referrals, and we're really actively trying to address that.
Are you seeing is it pretty much the same kids over and over in the 7th and 8th grade with the
Yes, but it's a lot of little things from a lot of kids too. Just struggling to regulate emotions, when they get mad, they just outburst and kind of react. So we're working also, Caitlin, our counselor, works with kids. She goes into classrooms and helps in our junior high classrooms, helping teachers, helping students in classrooms, trying to help them understand what they're doing and how it affects other students' learning. A lot of kids, will come to my office and I didn't do anything, or doesn't understand why or what. And so we're really trying to be proactive in teaching some of those social skills, teaching them how their behavior affects others, those types of things.
Does anybody else have any questions for Kim regarding the action item change for the handbook?
So does temporary removal from class, does that mean anything from part of a day to as many days as it takes?
Yeah, it could be, removing them the next day from that class for 1 or a few days, depending on what the incident is and how severe and what needs to happen.
Okay.
So.
Do you want to continue, Kim, and then we'll
Sure.
make the motion?
Sure. Some things that we did this year is we did a quarter 1 celebration on December 1st. So we honored the A and B honor rolls. Typically in the past, we've just done it after the semester. So we decided to do it every quarter. We had a bunch of kids that were on the B honor roll for the first time ever and wanted to make sure that we celebrated our kids and for that achievement. So we gave out certificates, also celebrated the grade level with the least amount of referrals and unexcused absences, and had individual winners. So again, we're going to do quarterly celebrations, kind of like what Bonnie does at the elementary, to really celebrate. And we pulled all the kids together so that everybody could see and celebrate that. Next is the Yeti program, which is the Youth Early Truancy Intervention Program that started out, and I linked in the flyer. Again, it's just another program that is really working to address truancy in kids not being at school. We had our first one last month at, they rotate between Pine City, East Central, us each month. And we had one family come and it was really successful. So again, we're hoping to continue to bring in families that really struggle with attendance and talk with Devin Peterson from Pine County around truancy and how to get kids into school. So that's a really great program. We're hoping that'll, again, increase attendance. Number 8 is just some dates for me. And then number 9 is Matt and Brecken with our high school program report.
So recently we had a celebration of the bowling team, which made it to state, which was pretty exciting. Yeah, from what I heard, they did pretty well, and yeah, it was a good pep fest. And so now talk about speech. Speech, we have an interesting problem this year. We have so many people that it's hard to get time with Frau, so it's a good problem to have, but it's also a little frustrating at times. With the play, we just started rehearsal last week. We are doing a small script for the competition coming in January, and that's exciting. We're all getting pretty excited, hoping we compete well. And for school, I guess for PSEO kids, like that's why Hannah couldn't be here, because it's finals week, so I mean that's a little stressful, but we're all, not just PSEO kids, but we're all looking forward to the winter break to come. And, yeah.
Boys basketball is 2-0, and then they have a home game tomorrow. And then girls, we're 2-4, and we have a game in St. Francis that we're hoping to win. Yeah.
Thank you, Matt and Brecken. Thank you, Kim. So now I'm looking for a motion, or does anybody have any questions for Kim on the total report or the kids? Okay, so I'm looking for a motion then to approve the action item in Ms. Henke's report to change the student handbook.
I'll move that. I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Next up is Bonnie, elementary principal report.
Good evening. First thing I have on there is our PLCs. We have a major change coming up with the new legislation of the READ Act. We got a pretty good process of really focusing on some behavior strategies, allowing our teachers and staff to fill their toolbox with a few more tools to really address some of these minor behaviors especially. We're still gonna try and hit that once a month, but all of our PLC time will be dedicated to our staff that are required to get letters training to do so. We are working with some of our other singletons and whatnot who aren't going to be taking letters to kind of focus on what they're gonna be doing. I know I see Mr. Golaki back there, and he's gonna be working with some outside entities to get some professional development in regards to art and those type of things, but we will be spending a lot of our time upcoming here with letters training. So it's a great training. It's just a huge time demand on our staff. So I'm a little bit concerned about that, but John has worked really hard on a grant to at least compensate them for their time. I also have a handbook adjustment in mind where I'm gonna delete some verbiage, and it's just really worded poorly. This is something I've never changed, and it says that if your child is not in school at any other time during the day, so in other words, if they're not there by 9 o'clock, they would be being considered absent for half a day. Working with Pine County and the tribe, if they're gone a half a day, it doesn't matter. They only look at a full day absence for educational neglect who are kids under 12. So I would like to just delete that, and we're going to just mark them tardy unexcused unless we're talking to families and whatnot and understanding the reason for the tardiness at school. So Jody, did you want to come back to that as an action item?
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
At the end.
So really not changing anything other than how we code them in our system. We'll still be proactively working with these families to identify why. Both our smart mentor, our dean, Corrine, our school counselor, and myself, just working with the families to figure out how we can improve some of that attendance, not moving forward with educational neglect. So, win time, we still have 50 minutes at every grade level to devote to what our kids need. Our kids are not then being pulled out of core. Kids are receiving their special ed services at that time, their title access services at that time, and really identifying where they need to work on, or those kids who have mastered the said skill to really push them and excel in that given area. So that continues to be successful. Conferences, I'm pretty proud to say that Finlayson had 93% attendance, which was the same as last year, and Hinckley Elementary was up 2% to 88%. It's just amazing. Our teachers work so hard to connect with our families. And it's just amazing that the relationships that you see throughout the building. I know Mr. Masterson was there, and just watching our teachers interact with the families is, again, just amazing. So we're always shooting for the 100%. I think we had like 3 classrooms that reached 100%, and it's just like success. They just love it. We started a share table at Hinckley Elementary. I've been working with the Minnesota Extension Office. We had kind of a share bin, but with the shared table, kids could actually come up during lunch and get extra. And we've had it for about 2 weeks? I don't know, a week or 2, and the kids love it. I mean, they're just going up and grabbing extra snacks. It's the things that's either the whole fruit, the milk, the juices, applesauces, anything that's unopened. Minnesota Extension came in to observe last week, and they just had nothing but good things to say about how our kids are using it, how our staff, and just how pleasant and welcoming. You're not going to hear that very often, how welcoming our cafeteria is. So it was good to hear. We do have Minnesota Go Wild again, not Minnesota Wild. Go Wild coming back into our 3rd grade classrooms this year. It starts next week. They offer a different exposure to different foods, different cooking, a free program to us. Finlayson doesn't qualify because of the number of free and reduced, but a great opportunity, and the kids loved it last year. In fact, they seen the gal that ran it, and they're like, "Are you coming back this year?" But we're offering to another grade level. So a couple things that I don't have in there is we have finalized a date for our Amplify coaching. So our staff were asking for more PD support with our new curriculum. John has been working really hard on scheduling. I can't take credit. Scheduling to get as many teachers in to see a model lesson by this expert, and then some time to debrief with her. Last year when we had her in, it was just kind of singletons where they got to watch, or she modeled a lesson for them. And then not everybody got to see her. So we're really working on trying to get as many teachers in as possible to see her. And Kim talked a little bit about our all school celebrations or our pause expectations. Just talking to Mr. Ubel about this as well, but we are celebrating 4 kids per month at grade level. We're recognizing also classrooms who really present themselves well in the cafeteria, in the hallway, in the restrooms, all those kind of target areas. And kids are really working for that. Like, they get a golden jump rope for the playground, and they just they get all super excited. We had one for the bus last week or last month, and they just, I think we're gonna see a trickle effect of kids wanting to earn this. So a couple other things that are going on at Hinckley Elementary. Questions?
I have a question for you, Bon.
Yeah.
The wild classes at the Hinckley Elementary, how, is that like an hour or 2 hours? How long does that normally?
It is 45 minutes, and they come in quite a bit. So we combine, it's for 3rd grade, so we combined our 3rd grade classes into 2. So she does 2 sessions a day, and they're about 45 minutes a piece. I wanna say she comes in 6 times with each group.
The only reason I was asking is because I know, it said Mills Elementary doesn't qualify for her to come here. I was just wondering if our students can go there.
I don't know if I can bend the rules like that, but I would be willing to investigate that.
Okay.
I can talk to her. I know she's gonna be in next week, so, I can reach out to her
Okay, thank you.
tomorrow and see.
Bonnie, with our free and reduced, can the kids go back for seconds of like a hot dish or whatever?
Nope.
So what happens to that food? Is it reused at a later date or thrown or?
I don't know.
We reuse as much as we can.
Okay.
Some of it's thrown, kids can be charged, they can go get a second meal, but they have to pay no
Right.
matter where they qualify, and that's $5. So we try to save as best we can for the next, what can be reheated and recooked, but.
Is that a federal regulation that ties us up on?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
For the seconds, there
Yeah.
are some things like our 6th grade is always last in Hinckley.
Yep.
They do, like if there's extra chicken nuggets and stuff, they can come up for some of that stuff.
Good.
I do know Finlayson, anybody gets to go up and have seconds, so
Okay,
I would
good.
actually like to find more if that is illegal or like, if it is, we're not doing things correctly. Cause you're right, Leo, I would much rather see the food go to the kids.
Right.
Like, let's feed them,
Yes, okay, good, thank
right?
you.
So, it's a great question.
They're actually not doing it here anymore. They're no longer allowed.
Finlayson is not doing it anymore.
Just saying.
If you could find out the legality though, Brian, I would
You'll
love
have
to
the
look
answer to our meeting
into
tomorrow.
All right, any more questions for Bonnie?
Bonnie, do they serve, like butter sandwiches? So,
just if it comes with, like, I don't know, say we had Salisbury steak and mashed potatoes and they had buttered buns, but nothing that they can just go up and get extras of.
okay. So no extra bread and butter, okay.
Any other questions? If not, I'm looking for a motion to approve Bonnie's action item of taking out that last sentence in her tardy policy.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. All right, next up is board committees. Does anybody wish to speak regarding their board committee?
Well, comparable work is going on pretty good. I only had one meeting and one more.
Anybody else? Then we'll move on to budget topics and unfinished business. Excuse me.
Just want to point out a couple things. We'll talk about a lot of this as we get to our truth and taxation hearing in just a little bit. Just want to continue to keep in front of the school board where our enrollment is. And you can see we're at 943 students. This was as of December 1st. We've had kids coming and going since then, so I would assume it's still pretty close to this 943. The part that's concerning for our budget is we budgeted for 980 students. So that's something we're keeping a very close eye on. Plan to, as once we get through December here and get through some negotiations to redo our district budget for this school year, as that's going to have an effect on the revenue that we've gotten from the state. So we can have a better picture of where we're at. So continue to watch that. That is something that we're going to have to keep our eye on, not only for this year, but as we plan into next school year as well. Other things that are beginning to happen, that the high school is enrolling student registration for next school year. Mrs. Scullard will begin looking at section needs for next year, and we start talking about that pretty intensively shortly after the new year. So we're starting to build those projections for next year, which will include then preparing our revenue projections and which will begin once you guys approve the levy, which we'll do here in a few minutes. The last thing in this category I just wanted to keep in front of the school board is where our food service is. Again, the state is still roughly about a month behind. You can see we kind of project that it's about 80,000 less. We anticipate that still coming in revenue. So if you add that 80,000 that we anticipate getting from the state for November, we're about 24,000 behind our expenses. So Sarah and I are meeting. One thing that we're discussing is pricing an a la carte to make sure that we're not losing money and potentially making a little bit more. And we have some other things that we hope to iron out here as we get to the semester to make sure we're being as efficient as possible. But still something we're keeping very close eye on as we don't want to get too much further apart. And we may need to make some changes in our food service. So questions on anything in that first part?
No questions? Then we'll move on to our policy reapproval. We have two this month, policy 603 curriculum development and policy 604 instruction curriculum. Does anybody have any questions regarding the two policies? If not, I'm looking for a motion to accept both policies.
I'll make the motion.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up is our truth and taxation presentation. Matthew Hammer is here from Ellers, not Aaron.
No, I kind of look like Aaron, but
yeah,
it's pretty close. Good evening. My name is Matthew Hammer. I'm Senior Municipal Advisor with Ellers, colleague of Aaron. I've worked with Hinckley in the past and have been on some other projects that the district's worked on. But tonight we're here to do our truth and taxation hearing, which is required for all jurisdictions in Minnesota that have taxing authority and has to be held in a meeting sometime after it. I think this year was November 25th, and by at least December 28th. So most school districts are holding these meetings at their December regular school board meeting, and these meetings have to take place after 6 p.m. There's a few requirements. We have to talk about the current year budget, or the school year budget, which is the 24 budget that was adopted in June, and then talk about next year's tax levy. And I will point out, just to right away start, is the proposed statements that would have went out to taxpayers that they received in November are going to look a little different than our final statements. So I think we have some good news from that perspective. If you received your statements, you saw a number on there where the district's levy was going up 10% as part of the proposed levy. We're going to be closer to 1.5% increase when the taxpayers get their final statement. So I think that's an important consideration for people. They're gonna see a different number when their final statements come out in March. Just high level, we'll give you just a little bit of background on where we're at from a state funding perspective. Minnesota legislature, as part of the Constitution, is required to provide for an equitable school funding system across the state. And they do that through tax policy and state law. Most of school districts' funding is going to come through state aid. In Hinckley's case, a portion of it obviously is coming through local tax levy. That makes up about 11% of the district's general fund budget. The other large portion is coming, about 82% will come through state aid, and then a smaller portion, the rest comes through federal revenues. And that's not untypical for a school district. That local levy typically is making up a smaller percentage of the district's overall revenue when you look at that budget, which is about 11% for you guys. The state sets those formulas. Most of them are pupil driven. So most formulas are driven by student enrollment, which is hence why school boards are talking about that on a monthly basis. And as those enrollment trends are moving up and down, school districts are paid based on the number of students that are served in that school district, and what's called average daily membership. So year end, those figures are figured, and then the state provides that revenue to the school district. You get 90% of that revenue in most formulas during the school year, and then the remaining 10% comes in the following year after all those numbers are figured at the state level. That state general formula, the basic formula that most people are accustomed to hearing, this legislative session that increased by 4% for 23-24. subsequently when we go into the 24-25 fiscal year, which is gonna be where this tax levy revenue is gonna be recognized. The state general ed formula was up at 2%. But as we look at what's happened with inflation, obviously that still is lagging. So if we do about a 2-decade look back and we would adjust that overall general ed formula or basic formula to inflation, we're about $1,300, $1,350 under that inflationary target. So we're about 18% behind that, or 18.5% of that behind that pace. And that's illustrated in that graphical illustration, and you can really see that inflation, as we're all aware, right, in our pocketbooks and our school budgets, is having an impact, and you can see that gap is widening even with the inflationary adjustments that were provided to school districts as part of the basic formula. When we look at the other big pressure point, special education, referred to often as a cross subsidy. In fiscal 22, there was about a $712 million statewide cross subsidy, which meant that state general education formula, or the school district's general formula, or general unassigned fund balance was typically making up that difference. That's still projected to be about $408 million between now and FY27. So it's not going away, even though there's been some movement at the state level to try to close that gap. When we look at levy changes, I think this is an important thing to point out as you look at your local levy. The district's local levy is only changing by 38,000, but even though it's going up by 38,000, that doesn't mean there's new revenue for the school district as part of their budget. A lot of the formulas are state driven, and we call it a state local share and then a state aid share. And a lot of those aid formulas are driven by property valuations, and as everybody's aware, if you have a property, those valuations have been increasing across the state, and most of those formulas that from a local levy perspective are getting impacted in some way. So specifically the district's referendum market value levies, most of those have a static factor at the state level. So as property valuations have been growing statewide, districts' local levies are increasing, or the portion of that revenue is increasing from the local share. So as districts, so oftentimes right now have decreasing enrollment, what we're seeing is the local levy is still increasing because the state share is decreasing. So I think that's an important piece to be cognizant of, even though this local levy is up about 38,000, that's the district's overall revenue for 25 as part of that levy is actually down. When we look at school district cycle, unlike other municipalities, most municipalities have a calendar year budget. Like I said earlier, this budget is going to be revenue, as the district's tax levy for 24 will be revenue for the school district in fiscal year 25. So it comes on a little bit of lag from a recognition perspective as the district sets their levy, and then these levies will be refigured 3 times between now and when they're final. So we're estimating this school district's enrollment at this time as part of this levy. Those numbers will be finalized and be adjusted 2 more times before these numbers become final, because they don't do anything that's not real accurate in Minnesota over time, but that means there's a lag in when the revenue gets recognized by the jurisdiction. When we look at the district's overall budget, the district has 4 funds. We talked about those a little bit earlier. The general fund makes up where the vast majority of the district's expenditures and revenue are recognized. The overall budget between all funds is about $17.5 million from an expenditure perspective. And revenues are $17,648,960. And these were adopted, budget figures that were adopted last June, so they'll be revised again after the new year. But you can see going into the year, those were based on a higher enrollment number, but the district's general fund was estimated to have a slight surplus as part of the adopted budget. But those obviously, as were discussed, were based on higher enrollment numbers. The food service budget and the community ed, or service budget are the other two, and then there's the debt service budget that has about a little bit more than $1.4 million budgeted. That's where the district's bond payments are reflected that are required to be levied for on an annual basis. So there's several graphical illustrations of the district's budget. I think the important thing to point out is school districts are people-oriented. So when you look at the district's general fund budget, it's about 78% made up of wages and benefits. And then you can kind of see the other categories. Purchase services is another major category, which is where transportation is housed for most school districts. And then the other categories, lesser categories are shown there. That's broken out on a programmatic basis where you can see regular education makes up about not quite 50% of the district's general fund budget, with the other program areas identified as part of that slide there on 16. So when we look at the district's levy, these are determined on an annual basis. We're just going to look at how that compares to taxes payable 24, and then we'll just give you a highlight of some historical look at where the district's taxes have been for some different various properties, property values for different types of property. When we look at kind of where we're at in this process, I think it's important to note that the school has very little control over most of the process. It starts really with the assessments that are done at the county, which is step one. That's done every year, and those assessments are done. The assessments for for the payable 24 are really assessments that were done in 23, and then next January those will be the basis for 25. Those are put through several processes with the legislature determining the formulas. The Minnesota Department of Education runs what is called the levy certification report that runs that through all the formulas, which are, like I said, are driven by enrollment. And then those are released out typically right around September 8th each year. And then school districts are required to authorize a preliminary levy by the end of September, and your district's meeting was on September 11th. So those reports were available for exactly about 2 days before the district had to certify the levy, which is why districts are certifying the max. And then you can't go above that number unless there's egregious errors that were part of that or commissioner approval or referendums. In this case, there were some changes that we're working to lower the levy. So we're lowering the levy by about $220,000 as compared to the proposed levy to account for the correct enrollment numbers as part of the formulas. The school board will certify this levy, and then the county auditor will actually take this information and it'll be part of the district's final tax there, the property owner's final tax statements that they'll receive in March. So those initial statements received as part of November did not have, they had the information as part of the proposed levy. Those will be updated to the final figures in March, and then taxpayers will pay taxes for taxes payable 24. When we look at the overall levy, it's up 1.4%. You can see as part of that, there's two categories that we'll just highlight where the changes are coming. Most of the school district's levies, like I said, are figured based on enrollment, but also the district had a catch-up as part of the last levy cycle for payments in regards to the lease purchase agreement for the gym. That catch-up was made as part of taxes payable 23, so the district's levy is decreasing by about $132,000 as a result of that. And then the other, most of the changes are pretty straightforward for the district's levy. They're pretty consistent with last year, but prior period adjustments also, like I said, because these numbers get refigured based on final enrollments, make up about $104,000 of the district's levy. So those are retroactive adjustments for previous years that are flowing through to this year's levy. which makes up about 104,000 of the district's change. So when we look at district's levies as a whole, each property owner's statement, or each property owner's property is going to get impacted differently. I like to kind of equate it as a pie. We're in holiday season, so you can think of it as a pumpkin pie or an apple pie. The district's levy, for the most part, is driven by the district's bond payments or debt service levies and enrollment, right? So on an ongoing basis, that doesn't change much. But your property can change differently than other properties in the district. So if everybody's property goes up by approximately about the same amount, you're gonna pay approximately, if the levy doesn't change, you're gonna pay approximately the same amount for the school levy outside of those changes. If your property goes up more than the average of the rest of the properties, you're gonna get a little larger chunk of that pie. If your property maybe doesn't change in value and other properties change by about 10%, you're gonna pick up less of the pie. And I can give you just a little bit of an example where this gets real pronounced, because I think it's been more substantial in current years than it has previously. But we work with the Brainerd School District. And last year, a lot of the lake property went up in excess of 50 to 100%, where valuations in town were going up by approximately 25% for the most part. But the homeowners in town actually saw decreases as part of their levy, and then the property owners on the lake actually saw huge increases because their valuations went up so much more than the rest of the property owners in the district. And that goes on an annual basis based on those assessments. So I think the most common thing we'll tell people if they're asking about their tax levy is to look at how much your valuation went up on your tax statement. Because that really can have an impact on what you're paying for property taxes. And just because it goes up doesn't mean there's going to be an increase proportional to what the district's levy goes up. When we look at the district's levy, I'm just going to go to the charts on where we're at from a historical perspective. These do account for the changes that happened as part. This is not based on proposed statements. This will be based on where we think final statements will be based on preliminary tax rates. If we look at a $125,000 property outside of valuation change for the last 4 years, you can see the trend where a $125,000 home would be paying about $389. That same $125,000 home today, if you had a property that hadn't changed in value, you'd be paying about $274. So if that, just to give you a little sense of how much difference there'll be between the proposed and final statement, we did run some analysis. That $274 would be up about $38. So it would have, if they had a home valued at $125,000, their proposed statement would say about $312 as part of the proposed statement. That's going to come down to the final statement to be closer to about $274. So that gives you a little sense. On the $200,000 home, proposed statement would have went out at about $533. So we're down about $62 from when the final statement will be out, just to give some people some perspective on where those numbers will be. Agricultural homestead property, you can see the trend on a per acre basis of what's been happening there. The A credit's been phasing in the district's debt service levy, so that is a result of that reduction, as well as property valuation growth at lowering tax rates, and then you can see where commercial property has been at. I think the next, the red bars there are somewhat interesting to look at, because this really accounts for valuation changes. And if we just look at a $125,000 residential home and we assume that property goes up about 42% in the last 4 years from where that property was valued back in 2021, you can see the net change. So that property would have been valued at about $87,000 or almost $88,000 back in 2021 and would have paid about $250 in taxes, school taxes. That property today would be valued at $125 and pay about $274 in taxes. And as the property valuations go up, you start to lose homestead market value exclusion, which naturally creates some increase in taxes for property owners as part of that as well. And then you can see the same trend on a $200,000 home, where that $200,000 property is not even quite as pronounced, where it's $446 back in 21. And today, the estimate is about $471. A property that would have changed in value by about 42% over that time. And that's pretty close to what the average would be. So when you look at that, you can see we're estimating there that property would have changed 5% between 21 and 22, 20% between 22 and 23, and then another 13% between 23 and 24. And then the remaining slides are just comparative. This looks at taxes payable 23 data and where your total school taxes would be at $125,000 residential home. And if you stuck a property that had the exact same value in any one of these communities, what would you pay in total school taxes? And you can see where Hinckley-Finlayson lands as the comparative group with many of your neighbors. On voter-approved levies, this is just looking at voter-approved levies as a whole, including the debt service levies. And you can see that total voter-approved levies are on the low end, with Willow River not having any voter-approved levies right now. And then you can see where the other comparative districts land. And then the final comparison there is looking at operating referendum revenue. And a lot of the districts don't have any operating referendum revenue in this area, unlike a lot of the state. About 60% of, well, 66% really of school districts across the state have some kind of voter-approved operating referendum. And a lot of districts in the central corridor, I say, are the ones that do not have some form of an operating referendum on the books. And then you can see where some of the other districts regionally have additional dollars to help support programs in their school districts. And then the final is just a comparison of districts with where fund balances land as part of the comparison group. And many districts are supporting fund balances to help offset any potential shifts in aid and those types of things that are important as part of your cash flow as a school district on an ongoing basis. We like to point out there's a few home refund programs, and there's been some changes in these. So if the school district's levy is not changing, but other components of a property owner's levy might be changing quite a bit more. These programs have been modified from last year. The first one's the home strike credit refund. That's income based. I'm going to hit on the special property tax refund because that is going from 12% change to a 6% change, which is quite a bit less than has been in the past. So that's an important one, and it's not income dependent. So property owners can qualify for that program, and there's a form that gets filled out every August. That's part of that. And then finally, there's just a deferral program that we'll just point out. That's not a that just allows a senior citizen to defer taxes. So the next steps will be to certify the levy and then take any public comment. If anybody has any comments about the district's levy, or if there's any questions from any of you guys too.
Does anybody have any questions for Matthew or Brian? So we first have to.
First, will you approve, Matthew? First, the board will approve.
Yeah.
Yep. And then take public comment?
Yeah, well, actually, let's take public comment before we approve.
Okay. Yeah. I don't want to open up the public comments.
Does anybody wish to speak in the public? All right, then if no one wishes to make a public comment, then we are going to, I'm looking for a motion to approve levy option number 1.
Which is the max.
Which is to levy the max.
I'll
second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew.
Yes.
All right, next up is board committees.
Yeah, typically we wouldn't talk about this. I mean, the board will act on officers in January, but in January we have a new school board member coming on. So no action tonight, but just some committees that we are going to have to for sure fill, but maybe some opportunity to reshuffle. So I just thought to get that on your mind before we get to January, as we'll have to fill at minimum the committees that Shelley is currently on. So I don't know if there's any questions on that, but that was why I had that on there this month.
And I guess if you want to drop or you're interested in another, just email Brian or I, and then we'll talk about it next meeting, January meeting. Does anybody have any questions? Next up is first read policies.
Just first read on these, the Literacy and Read Act would be the brand newest one, which we've talked about a little bit, but were there any questions as you've read through these policies? They were all three taken straight from MSBA's recommended policy.
All right, then we are moving on to the resolution to accept donated funds.
Recommend approving the following resolution. You can see that the school board would accept a monetary gift from the Finlayson Lions in the amount of $10,000. And the conditions outlined by the Finlayson Lions are the donated funds would be used to retain a consultant to assess the appropriateness and feasibility of providing child care services at FES. And then any remaining funds would help with any upfront costs to get a potential daycare started.
I have one question. Is the $87.50 for the startup, is that from start to finish? Is that from application, because the application has not been sent? Correct. So is that from application to reopen the doors to a daycare?
That is to get the application submitted with the policies. Basically, yes. Did you see her proposal?
Yes. So, but the school board hasn't approved a daycare. So is.
Right. This is to get the application, the board approved to do the application, and that's what this is, to help us get the policies.
Which I understand, but if this is from start to open, why aren't we just asking or doing from start to bringing the school board a business plan?
That's what it is. Yeah. Do you have?
Yeah, I can hold up again.
Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm asking, is there a separate amount, since we haven't approved the daycare? We haven't approved the daycare. We've approved the application. So is there a dollar amount to get us a business plan? Or why are we accepting?
That's her part of her role.
Right, I understand. I've met with Anna and you before, but I'm asking, why are we spending $87.50 if we haven't already approved the daycare?
Because we have to have all these things in place to submit the application. We have to have the policies, we have to have all the stuff in place in order to submit it.
It basically gives you information to approve it or not approve it. That's what one of the things.
But if the $87.50 is to get us all the way to opening the doors for the daycare, what if we never get to that point?
We have to have all of these things done in order to submit the application. We have to have policies in place. We have to have, the state has, 30 pages of things, and she's gonna go through those.
So what she put in her consulting was assist in completing and submitting that necessary documentation for the application process, help develop a detailed budget, including projections for both initial setup costs and ongoing operating expenses, policy creation, and collaborate with the district facility management team to plan and coordinate any renovations that may be needed. And then the deliverables: complete the application, help complete the application, including all required documentation, detailed budgeting document, comprehensive child care policies and procedures, a well-organized and appropriate modified child care space at Finlayson Elementary School.
Was there also matching funds?
There was. We're not approving those tonight. We were gonna approve those after, if the daycare happens, is my understanding. This we would approve to help with those initial setup and application process.
This is just to accept the money that the Lions are donating to the district, is all this resolution is. Right, Brian?
Correct.
Dollar amount is what, 10,000?
Correct.
Correct.
10,000.
From the Lions.
Yeah.
And I guess I understand that part. I just didn't know if there was a different dollar amount to get us just the business plan. There's not, is what you're saying.
There's not, because we have to have all of those things on there in order to submit the application, which I didn't know at the time. I didn't know when this was, I'm guessing Dave didn't know either, all that was involved in the application prior to, it wasn't just.
Okay, so then is there gonna be like a business plan so we can vote on this, or?
That's what she's gonna help us with, yes. Because you have to have all of that in place.
Okay.
All of that has to be in place before you can submit an application.
I've started reaching out to other districts in the state that haven't heard back from a lot. Some are starting to send their financials. I probably only have from 3 schools so far, but a lot of them have said, this person, so you need to talk to. It's just, I haven't been able to get all that information yet, but other schools are starting to get me some of their financial information that the board can look at as if we go forward, or as we go forward.
With regard to now therefore be it resolved as follows, 2B as in Bravo, what do we do with the remaining funds if the daycare is voted not to be approved? 2B just says the remaining funds after paying the consultant would be used to purchase any materials needed to get a daycare up and started. Well, if it's voted not to start it up, what will those funds be used for, or will they be returned to the Lions?
Correct. I believe we have to have some of those things upfront materials to apply. So this would go, my understanding was this would go to the consulting service, and then any remaining would help get cots and things like that, because we have bookcases, storage, because we have to have those before we apply too, is my understanding.
That's part of the application, so yeah. Have to own that stuff, so apply.
Yeah.
So we could potentially be putting money into something that we maybe end up not approving and could have cots and these other things that we maybe won't need.
There will be no district funds in this
Well,
part.
right.
And the Lions are aware that.
It's being ran through the district.
But the Lions are aware that there is the potential, yes.
And they're okay,
Yes.
like still giving the
Yes.
funds
Yes.
without the
They
full
do, yes.
expectation of.
In other words, they'll take that
Approved.
risk.
Yes.
Okay.
Got it.
So when do you think we'll have a business plan, did she say?
She's hoping to have all of the policies and everything. She wants to have it all done, so the 6 months in the end of June, so end of January, she would have everything done. All the policies and all of that.
She had commented that normally it does take 6 months because the state moves so slow.
Yeah.
But she said right now, the turnaround's about 3 as an average. So I expect to have that a lot sooner than 6 months.
So we're gonna pay her, or the Lions are basically paying her $87.50 whether we open a daycare or not.
Correct.
So what do we do with those materials to open a daycare if we decide not to have a daycare? I mean, are we gonna liquidate it somehow or what? And what is that materials list? We got cots, what else?
Storage facilities, I guess those were the 2 big ones that I had thought of that we didn't have here was cots.
It's not much, it was cots. Little
Bins,
cubbies.
yeah.
Little storage shelves, little things like that for the.
And that was about
put
it.
stuff in, yeah. There wasn't a great deal of products that had to be bought that weren't already in
A
there.
lot we have, or we have a lot of what is required was my understanding, just especially cots was probably the biggest one.
Yeah.
Cause they have to be an elevated cot, they can't be a mat that lays on the floor.
Okay.
Do we have a rough guess as to how many children we'd be able to provide care for?
14.
14.
So that
For
would,
right now, in the space we have currently.
we're taking babies, we're taking the next group up, so that, what's the younger one, toddlers? Toddlers is 4 to 1. Okay, so that increases your cost for, and generally, that's also, daycare is charged more for younger because their expenses are higher, and then the next group, as I recall, is 7 to 1.
Okay.
So 14 is 2 employees.
I guess that was just my question, if it was less to just know, like, I guess, the meat and potatoes of opening the business. But it doesn't sound like that's a difference then in price. So we're not voting on opening a daycare, we're voting on accepting donated funds to specifically be used to apply for a daycare permit, basically.
I feel like it would make more sense if we would just get some more data from some other school districts, see how they're doing financially with their daycares. And maybe even talk to that daycare in Sandstone, see how they're doing. Are they having problems attracting and retaining caregivers? And how are they doing financially, if they'd be willing to share any kind of information?
And we certainly can table the item if you would like,
Well, you know, if you,
to get
you
more
gotta
information.
apply to gather all this information, see how other districts are doing, and need that information to vote if we're gonna do a daycare. Because we're not voting tonight to do a daycare, we're voting to accept the funds to start the ball rolling. Okay, and part of that ball is information on business plans, how much you pay the people, all those kind of things to see where it's at. And then we vote yes or no. I'm trying to unmuddy the water here on what we're trying to do tonight and what that leads to. And it leads to no obligation on the school board part.
And I get that, I just kind of feel like we're like ahead of ourselves voting on the application with not having even voted on the daycare. But we're at this situation right now, so it's a moot point.
Right, the application is so incredibly complicated.
Right.
That it's not something, unless you're really trained in how to do it, that you can do in your lifetime, you know? So that's the idea of hiring her to do this. This is her wheelhouse.
So she's basically coming up with manuals, putting everything together, so if it gets approved, the manuals are there, etc.
She set up the one in Sandstone that you're talking about, and she set up the one in Pine City.
I guess I would prefer to see her devote her time, not put together manuals at such a detailed scale, but how about take a macro look and see how other school districts are doing. Gather the data. How is that daycare doing in Sandstone financially? Gather the data. Give us more of a macro view of whether we want to proceed or not, and then if we do, then have her consult and put together the manuals and apply for the application. I'd rather see, is this something we really want to get into or not before we develop manuals for a daycare?
But we need to have that
doesn't sound like
before,
that's an option.
we need to have that information. She's the one doing it. We need to have that information before we can apply.
I don't see the rush in applying. Why is it such a rush to apply? Why
So we've been working on this for years, and now we finally have a financial.
It doesn't mean that we actually have to do it.
It's to get the information.
It's a major financial obligation to apply, and I feel like if we're gonna apply, we better maybe know a little bit more ahead of time that this is really what we wanna do.
We already as a board approved to apply. Back in
March,
May,
right? Yeah, April or May.
we already as a board voted to, and we approved that. We just didn't realize how involved the application process was. So we wanna bring Anna in to help us do it the right way. And the Lions Club is willing to donate the money for us to apply and get all of this stuff filled out and done the way the state wants it to. She's done it twice already, very successfully.
I agree, we did vote on it, but at that board meeting, it was discussed that it would be $500 application
It is,
fee, not
that's all
$87.50.
the district is responsible for. The Lions know.
And the Lions gets a lot of donations from the community, and I think we should really be caretakers of any donation we get from anybody, and I think the Lions, the community expects.
The only comment was, though, they have designated this funds for the daycare application.
And the other thing is too, would the Lions really be happy if we just rush into this and then we get more data back on how other school districts are doing financially, and then we decide, well, this doesn't look very attractive, it's a money-losing proposition, we have declining enrollment, this might not be a good thing for us, and now we just applied and consulted for $87.50 plus $500 on top of that?
Which I understand, Toby, but it's not our decision we're not spending the $87.50. They're giving that money.
What's that?
They're giving that money specifically for the application and.
Knowing that risk is there.
Yeah, and I was hoping it was gonna be smaller because I'm not comfortable taking that much money and not having approved a daycare. I'll be honest, I'm not. But this is just for the application and there's no way around the $87.50 for consulting fees. That's what I understand.
I think the Lions Club has a pulse on the community, and I'm assuming it was voted on by the Lions group, and they feel so strongly about this, they're willing to take a $10,000 gamble. And I think we're foolish if we don't accept that.
One of the comments they made at one of the meetings we had was they were actually looking at daycare several months before they realized there was some interest from Hinckley. This was their own independent thoughts. So it's not, they're waiting for this to start rolling.
I'll make a motion to accept it.
So is this a feasibility?
I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second. Is there further discussion?
I have a discussion. So 2A says the donated funds will be used to retain and consult to assess the appropriateness and feasibility providing childcare services at the district Finlayson Elementary School. So appropriateness and feasibility, does that mean all the manuals?
What I'm understanding is part of, in order to get the application in, we have to have all those policies, procedures. I think some of that what will come will be a business plan, and the feasibility is it affordable? Is it something the district can attain that we can we sustain it? Is it something that's gonna benefit us, enrollment? Is it something that could hurt us? That's how I read the feasibility part, but we have to have those policies and procedures in order to get the application in.
And right after that feasibility part, it does say as well as provide support writing policies and procedures. So that is specified right in the resolution as well.
All right, so there's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
Where did you see that, Heather?
That section that you read, in the third paragraph, to assess the appropriateness and feasibility, as well as provide support writing policies and procedures. It's immediately following that section that you read.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you see it, Toby?
The whereas, the third paragraph?
Yep. Yep, if you just keep reading beyond what you cited, it's just right there.
all in.
Go ahead. I was just gonna say, I just feel like Brian just pulled some school districts on how they're doing, and I just feel like, why not just wait another month, see what info we get back, and if everyone's taking a huge loss, maybe we can just save the Lions $87.50. Maybe they can donate it towards scholarships or other useful things for our kids.
We can't tell them how they want to do
Well,
it.
certainly we cannot, but maybe we can give the money back and they can decide what they want to do with it. But if it's not something we want to proceed with based on further information that Brian might be able to gather by pulling other school districts, I don't see the harm in delaying it a month and seeing what these other school districts have to say. Are they profitable? Because I don't think we can stand to take a loss. We have shrinking enrollment 3 years running.
But the district isn't taking a loss.
What if the daycare takes a loss?
We haven't approved the daycare. We're just approving the application.
I know that.
We're voting to accept the daycare, or voting to accept this money to use for an application.
I understand that, but once the application gets submitted, it's probably gonna get approved at some point, and then we'll have a daycare.
And then it will come back to the board to approve at that point. Once we have the application done, then it'll come back to the board to approve.
I just think we're putting the cart before the horse.
I think we just have to remember too that obviously the Lions have thought a lot about this, and if they are fully aware that by us accepting this donation, it's not like making us like guarantee that there will be a daycare if they're
We're fully
willing to
aware
make
we
that.
haven't voted on a daycare.
Is there harm in waiting 1 month? Gather more data from Brian?
There's a motion and a second on the table.
Okay.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
We'll do roll call. Leo?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Dave? Toby?
No.
Angela?
Yes.
Shelley?
Yes.
Julie, yes. Motion passes 6-1. The next item on the agenda is science fair discussion.
Yeah, I put it as an action item, so I don't know if you guys want to do that. But as Toby brought up, wanted to have a discussion about opening the science fair up to public. Historically, I could just speak from my history. It's been open out of the 13 years I've been here, probably open in some capacity, probably, and Mr. Ranger, I'll look to you, maybe 10 of those 13 years. Last year, if you remember, we canceled all the time. We went through 4 different science fair dates. We had COVID in there were the other kind of years where it wasn't as easy to bring the community in. This year it was not available or open to the public. Do we want to discuss historically it's more often been open to the public than not. When I started in Hinckley-Finlayson, it was a much bigger in-depth open to the public where there was still judging going on. The kids were here. Community came in. It was probably open from that 6 to 7:30 hour. In my last handful of years prior to COVID as principal, it became more coming to get the projects. Parents and students coming to pick up that project. There wasn't a lot of other community. Not saying we couldn't revamp it, but that's just some history for U7, at least in my experience with the science fair. I don't know if can I call him Joe? Joe wants to add more, or Miss Hinckley wants to add more for this year, but that's just some of the history, at least in my 13 years here.
I'd say that's accurate. Last year we did have weather-related science fair delays many a times. The year before that, we were also crossed against, I believe, a basketball game or 2 and also band and choir concerts at the same time. And then we had our COVID years, so we haven't had a true blue open house since pre-COVID years. We, in my 14 and almost half years now, we had a lot more from like the 6 to 7 time slot open for people to come in and walk around. So I don't know if that was a policy or whatever per se, but that was a thing that happened and has waned since.
So we haven't had any public visiting since COVID, pre-COVID?
Not for recent.
Probably the fall of 2019.
Yeah, because that's before the shutdown, so that happened. There are some seniors that have went through it. I do recall we had judging and things like that. I think the year where we were doing block scheduling and week A's and B's, we had one fair. I don't know if it was open to the public, but I do remember students en masse and judges en masse there talking and presenting their projects. I don't know, that was a traumatizing time. But I do, yes, I will say beforehand, we had more open to the public, traditional open houses.
And we did talk today about next year looking at, I know the evening doesn't necessarily work. We have a lot of kids that have other commitments and things, and that was kind of a struggle they've had in the past. So we're talking about next year putting a public time during the school day, whether it be before judging, after judging, something like that. So that is something we're gonna look to do next year.
And correct me if I'm wrong, for this year, to kind of help, since the public couldn't, we're gonna get it up on our Facebook page and website.
Yep.
So people can see, Mr. Ranger did take pictures of every student with their project, so, or Mr. Ranger, sorry. So we're gonna get that up on social media and our website, so people can at least see that, because we know that was something that was, that didn't get to happen this year.
I don't know if the rest of the board got feedback, but I did get a feedback from a constituent disappointing that they weren't able to go see their child's project. And
I took some phone calls today too. I think Ms. Hinckley took one.
Yeah. So we'll definitely fix that for next year,
Thank you.
100%.
Is it still in the small gym?
This year it was in the gym off the cafeteria. We've had it in that gym, we've had it in the small gym. I think a lot of it is determined prior on the basketball schedule. If we have games, it's safer to play in our bigger gyms for basketball games than the science fair's been in the small gym. But maybe if we get that date, as best Mandy can work the basketball schedule around the science fair date. That's not always easy, because you're trying to get in 26 games for boys and girls. But like this year, there wasn't a varsity game, so it is possible.
And that would be better too, I think, if we're gonna open it to the public, having it in the big gym, just for people not going through the high school with students in session, so.
I don't know if we need to vote on that.
I don't think we need to vote on it being an action item.
I can change it to discussion.
thank you for adding the item to the agenda.
Yeah. All right, so we are now at negotiation strategy. I am recommending going into closed session according to Minnesota Statute 13D.01 to discuss employee negotiation strategy. I'm looking for a motion. I'll second. Here's the motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye.